How do plants travel the world? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the Northwoods talking about nature right outside your front door. Not a deep dive into science, but how can we just understand everything else that's going on? The birds migrating, the moths migrating, all those things that have happened. But now let's think about a more quiet kind of thing that goes on. How do seeds spread? And they're going to be a little bit different. Most plants spend all summer long taking sunlight, turning it into sugar, building stems and flowers and leaves. But now it's time to pack up and think towards the future into little capsules they call seeds and then send them off so that they can spread to places where they can grow. Plants, of course, can't walk, swim, fly, but their seeds can. And some of them will float on the wind. Some of them are hitchhikers. And some of them burst into tiny little canyons, and other ones creep along the ground. Every seed has kind of a story of motion, of how it gets from point A to point B. The idea, you think about it, is the seed wants to, this plant's right here, it wants to maybe go over yonder a little bit, which is also a good place for it to be, so it could grow over there. And if you walk in any meadow in late September, you'll start to see white tufts of fluff floating around. My friend and I were out bird watching, like I said, a couple weeks ago, and my car is filled with little white specks of all sorts of things. You can see it stuck to the upholstery everywhere. And you know what? Those are travelers. Things like milkweed and thistle, goldenrod, cattails were poofing and then spreading things everywhere. Fireweed. They all use these kind of silky parachutes to ride along the wind until they can find a home. Well, my car probably wasn't the best option. But a single milkweed pod can hold almost 200 seeds. They attach to a cluster like fine hairs, and they do what is considered to be like a coma. That these hairs build up an electrostatic charge. They rub together in the dry air, right? It's just like my hair flies all over the place because it's nice and dry outside, creates like sort of a repelling force, which will keep the seeds from clumping up, but also sort of keep them moving. So this little charge they have, plus a little breeze, helps the milkweed stay airborne far longer than you would expect. I am trying to grow milkweed in my backyard, and I think it's just great. And so many of the bugs and the bees and everything just love it so much. But it does create that electrostatic situation. And just like dandelions can hover around suspended in the ground, the sun heats the earth itself, creates those kind of heated convection systems, almost acts like little tiny winds that are out there. There are other types of airborne travelers out there. You'll see maple seeds. They create those helicopters and they'll come, spiraling down. And when we were out looking for birds, they were all over the ground. They are called samaras, and they spin in wind circles. So that shape is so aerodynamic that it can send, seed pods everywhere. Someone said that the scientists have investigated how good the maple spinners are to help us make better drones and things that can fly. Ashes, elms, tulip trees, they also have kind of a single wing design, but a similar idea. And if you live near cottonwood, I am so allergic to cottonwood, but I can tell you it gets everywhere because then I sneeze all summer long. But in early summer, that white fluff is everywhere, floating down rivers. It's like snow in June, and I'm sneezing quite a bit. So that's the idea, that these winds catch these various plants, these silky types of helicopters and things that they have, and fly them all over the place. The other kinds of hitchhikers that you've probably seen is kind of like a Velcro. Yeah, I have Velcro where the strips, stick together. You brush against a tall piece of grass and you end up covered in burrs. I am trying to get rid of, but I have thistles in my backyard and something called burdock. I have a lot of burdock in my backyard. And there's other plants out there called stickseed and beggar's tick. Also looks a little bit like burdock or that. And the idea is that it will, if you walk against it, so I'm mowing my lawn, right? and this happens to me all the time, and I brush against these plants, which I'm trying to get rid of in my backyard, it sticks to me. So then I walk to the other side of my yard and I start looking at my shorts all full of burrs, and I start pulling them off and flinging them into the grass. Yeah, I'm helping spread them. You're right. But that's how they spread. So animals that walk through, people that walk through, they will get stuck on the side of things and they will then find a new home. And so when a fellow in 1941, a Swiss engineer called George de Mestral, came home covered in them, he looked at them under a microscope and noticed that there's little hooks, perfect to attach to fibers, and it attached to him. And so that is the idea. And he supposedly got that idea for creating Velcro because of that hook and loop fastener that we have and then we sort of take for granted. But there's some other examples. There's a lot of examples out there. Goosegrass, there's something called cenchrus, which is kind of a sand burr. It is in the southern fields, and it has spines that are so sharp, actually, if you step on them, they can puncture the foot. But they also have a very effective transportation. There's something called cockleburs that attach themselves to migratory birds, other animals, and maybe will travel hundreds of miles before they eventually fall off. So hitchhiking is one of the oldest partnerships between plants and animals. And even though we don't volunteer for it, they just go everywhere they can hitch a ride. And then there are ones that are considered to be floaters, and those are the ones that ride water systems. So a rain comes through and creates wetlands, channels, the streams get swollen with things. And those are going to be also those cattails, like I said, that are all over my car, sedges, arrowheads. I've heard of some of these plants too. Their casings are waterproof, and so they're very good at floating along the water surface until they hit their next muddy bank. And next spring, that's where they'll go. We have that marsh that my friend and I go to all the time. And at one point, they tried to clean up the marsh quite a bit and get some of this thicker vegetation down and kind of give plants a chance, to grow that were other plants in there. And that was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And that place is completely thick with cattails and things like that again. So it doesn't take long. The lotus plant, we see those in various ponds, but particularly in China, their seeds can be viable for over 1,000 years. They found one Chinese peat bog that germinated a 1,300-year seed pod of dormancy. We've also noticed, I know that archaeologists have found seeds and have tried to get them to grow. This was the longest living of natural recording, of a plant coming back, but we have seen other plants that have come back too. But even on a smaller scale, marsh marigolds, we have those in my marsh that's by me, water lilies. They send their seeds adrift, creating these little floating pods. The frost comes, those seeds sink into the silt, and then we're ready for next spring for them to grow. The last group is called the exploders, and they launch with kind of a force. Not every plant is sort of sedentary and just going around with the whatever is around next to them. Jewelweed, which is really pretty, is called touch-me-nots. They have a seed pod that builds pressure as they dry, and then one touch, it uncoils like a spring, and then it flings their seeds maybe up to even 20 feet. I used to do that. I forgot what the plant was when I was a kid, but they would get really tight, and all you had to do was sort of tap on them, and they go. And so I was spreading weeds around my yard too when I was a kid. Apparently, that's what I do. But the pop is even so distinctive, you can even hear it. And someone called it the popcorn of the forest. But it's a sound that you can even record, and they sort of considered to be like nature's confetti canyon. But there's other plants, witch hazel, which is really a big woody plant up here in the North Woods. It can shoot seeds up to about 30 feet. Violets have a coiled structure. Maybe that's what I was spreading around in my yard, which will catapult seeds several inches, spreading them around like a kind of a shady understory of trees. And there's even something that is called squirting cucumber, the Mediterranean, which it shoots like it's fruit through the water, almost like a little rocket. So this dispersal method works great, particularly when you're getting into dry autumn weather. Like I said, as that dryness happens, they start to get spring-loaded. And the pod loses its moisture, the tension builds, and then something, maybe like me poking at it, comes around, and then it springs off. And then there's the category that's called the walkers, which sounds really creepy and a little bit like The Walking Dead. But they walk across the landscape. So what they do, and I have a bunch of these in my yard too, they run stems underneath the ground, and then that plant comes up, maybe 3 feet over there. And the similar plant, but it's a new plant. It's a new area. Strawberries will do that. You think of a lot of the really invasive plants, about the loosestrife, the purple loosestrife. I have gooseneck loosestrife, which you were not really supposed to plant, but it's cool because it comes up and it looks like a goose, but it has runners under there and it's very hard to contain. I put it in an area that was surrounded by rock wall that went down feet, and it got out, and now it's growing into where I mow anyway, so I just mow them over. But you can think of a lot of plants that grow with runners. I have a plant that's tiger eye sumac, and it also produces runners. It's a beautiful plant. It looks beautiful all summer long in this lime green, and then turns a gorgeous orange and red in fall, but it will run runners everywhere. And it's funny, my neighbor said to me at one point, "Oh, that plant is so beautiful." And I said, "Well, look at it. There's like 15 little baby plants all around here. You want to grab one? I can go get the shovel. We could dig one out for you." So if you do dig them out, you have to get enough of the roots so that they'll grow again. But they send shoots out everywhere, and so they will actually create more plants everywhere. So the idea of those types of plants, you can see too, if you go into a prairie, there's colonies of circular thickets, and those are sort of footprints of decades of that plant spreading out through the underground rhizomes and coming up someplace else. So, we're big seed dispersers. That's why a lot of times when we go hiking, there's the brushes that you're supposed to brush off your boots because we do track a lot of invasive species everywhere. We're probably carrying seeds with us. So it's also good to keep in mind that we won't probably want to clean off our hiking boots from time to time and use those brushes that we'll see in various state parks and whatnot to keep our shoes clean. Pets too. Pets will bring plants everywhere because think about it this way. You have a deer, right? And the deer is walking through and moving a seed from here to there. But your dog is getting into the car, driving 30 miles home and bringing that plant. And that's why we have such a species like a garlic mustard, Japanese stiltgrass, far from their homes of where they started. And so you can see it. You've heard of people probably talk about garlic mustard. I see it on the trail all the time. There's also like a different kind of weed. I forgot what it was. Everywhere you can see it. And what it is as we get more mobile, as we get cars and we go hiking here and there, we're bringing all those plants out with us too. Boats as well. We've heard of a number of different species that come over through boats. But that's how we connect in the world, and that's how plants survive through different methods of hopping from one location to the other. So I think, my challenge to you is the next time you go outside, look around, see what kinds of seeds you see. Are they around the area they got dropped, or maybe they're off a little bit longer? You ever kicked an acorn down to the trail and suddenly it's way over yonder when the acorn tree's over there? That's what you get the idea. So kind of watch out for what seeds you have. And if you have burrs on you, if your hiking boots get all full of seeds, maybe take a moment and clean them off. Maybe not in someplace where they could take root and grow, someplace where they probably don't belong. I appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed this issue. I think that it's amazing how resilient plants are and how these different ways of getting them to move across landscape and then produce a brand new plant, how is so amazing. So thanks so much for watching. If you have anything to say to me, you can put it right here in the chat, or you can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions or want to know about more of my podcasts, check out jillfromthenorthwoods.com. That's where all my podcasts, all my YouTube channels are. And my friend Em, who goes hiking with me, has a beautiful garden blog called emsgarden.com. She grows amazing plants. Boy, she knows probably more about how seeds spread than anybody, but really beautiful blog. So if you're interested in seeing, just nature that you can get in your backyard, she's the person for that. Thanks so much and have a great day.